Thank you. Thank you very much. This is the third time that I've come to Republica, and I've enjoyed it quite a lot. I've become completely addicted to it. My title was Robots Behaving Badly, but I keep thinking that probably I should change it to this. I, for one, welcome our new robotic overlords. Now, every time I present, I have two different things that I like to do. First is an apology, and then a story. First, the apology. The apology is that I've presented now for 2 years, and I've been researching on the rights side of artificial intelligence, whether robots should have copyright, whether we should allocate any sort of ownership to artificial intelligence. This is the first time that I'm looking at the other side, which is the responsibility, the liability of artificial intelligence and robots. The story is that I became very interested in this area particularly because of a book by Charles Stross, and it's called Halting State. Sorry, it's a sequel to Halting State. It's called Rule 34. Now, Rule 34 refers to an internet meme that states that everything in the world can be subject to internet pornography. But the book specifically talks about a rogue robot or a rogue agent that has gone crazy and started killing people with Internet of Things devices. Now, this is completely independent, and just because it decided that the people were his enemies. These specific people were internet trolls, and it decided these people are trolls. My objective in life is to destroy trolls, so I'm actually going to kill them. He organized some very interesting ways for them to be killed. And that got me thinking into various things about the responsibility that is allocated to artificial intelligence. And one of the problems, and one of the first issues that I encountered is that we do not understand quite well what we mean by artificial intelligence. So that gets to my actual apology. My apology is that if you are here invited in any way by Algorithms Watch, I apologize because I don't have a lot to say about algorithms yet. My research is ongoing, and there are people that are working quite interestingly in algorithms, particularly some of my colleagues, Lillian Edwards and Michael Veal, shout to them, people who are looking at the regulation of algorithms, so I won't be covering that specifically. I also won't be covering one aspect of self-driving cars. I will talk a little bit about that. I couldn't come to Germany and not use David Hasselhoff, I guess. I grew up with this, but one of the things I don't want to cover is the regulation itself of self-driving cars. Now, my idea, and I'm perfectly fine if people disagree with this, my own idea on self-driving cars, on the regulation, is that it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think it's quite possible that the regulation is going to be quite quick because of the commercial interests that are surrounding it. So the regulation itself is not a problem, I think. It is going to be a problem about some other things. That means that I won't be covering the trolley problem, which is quite famous when people are talking about regulation of self-driving cars, and also the 3 laws of robotics. Very nice analogy, very interesting thought experiment, but probably very useless when we're talking about artificial intelligence. And also, of course, something that is not... I know I'm spending a lot of time telling you all of the things that I'm not going to tell you, but it's trying to give you an idea of the things that I'm probably going to tell you. because these areas are not as interesting. They get a lot of the coverage in the press. They get a lot of interest in people talking about artificial intelligence, but they tend to be a little bit less interesting, if I may say so, like that. Now, something else that I won't be covering is killer drones, the idea of drones and robots that are going to kill, and automated agents that are going to kill people. One of the problems that I think we have been encountering so far is the trying to find a good definition of artificial intelligence. This is one of my favorites in the Douglas Hofstadter, in the amazing book, Gödel, Escher, and Back. AI is whatever hasn't been done yet. And it sort of plays into the idea of it's the future. The future, things that are not in existence, things that are not possible. We tend to imbue artificial intelligence, at least in a lot of the coverage in the press, but also in academic writing, in sort of mythical, almost godlike powers to artificial intelligence. We tend to give them that. Now, they may become something along those lines, but I guess that is probably going to be something like this. When we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking more about very specific devices, robots that do vacuum cleaning, and robots that put together cars, and all sorts of things. So I'm actually more interested in this side of artificial intelligence. I think that this is where the legal issues are going to be more important. In the mundane, in the everyday, in whether your Roomba destroys your room and kills your cat, goes crazy one day. And I think that's probably going to be the most relevant aspect of artificial intelligence. So first, we have to start by defining what is artificial intelligence. I like, as I told you, the definition by Douglas Hofstadter, but this is a more recent one in a very good book on artificial intelligence. It's a collection of essays by Russell and Norvig. It's actually 2 L's on the Russell, but anyway. AI is a study of agents that receive precepts from the environment and perform actions. And I prefer definitions like this, because these types of definitions are actually leaving the intelligent part outside of it. I think yesterday in one of the keynotes we heard a very nice term about natural stupidity as opposed to artificial intelligence. And I think that if we leave the smartness, the intelligence, the relative intelligence of the agents, that is going to be more useful when we are finally dealing with the legal consequences of this. Let's forget about the magical, superhuman artificial intelligence that is either going to come and destroy us or and harvest us for as batteries, probably to mine Bitcoin, or this other idea of absolutely all-powerful, almighty, all-purposeful artificial intelligence. So I want to provide 3 scenarios for you, or sorry, 5 actually. A few of the things that are already taking place that are part of artificial intelligence. So back in March of this year, this was covered quite a lot in the news. An Uber car in Arizona crashed into a person. I don't know if that's the correct term, and killed a cyclist in Arizona. The police have made the details available, and the video available is quite horrific. But it prompted quite a lot of discussion of who was responsible for this. Was Uber responsible? Was the person, there was supposed to be a person in the car that was going to stop the car if something bad happened, and the in-cameras in the car actually gave us a good idea that this person was like on the phone and wasn't even paying attention. So this prompted quite a lot of debate of what's going to happen when something like this is going to happen. This is going to continue to happen, and everyone that even the most strong advocates of self-driving cars are telling you this is eventually going to happen. At some point, a car is going to kill people. Now, we are not going to get any test in the courts because Uber did what everyone was expecting them to do, and they immediately settled out of court with the family for a non-disclosed amount of money. We're probably talking about millions and millions and millions. Something more interesting, perhaps, and this is something that is going to be more mundane. And that's one of the reasons why I'm more interested in the mundane elements of artificial intelligence are things like smart contracts. Now, these are contracts that are written on the blockchain. By the way, anyone playing Republica bingo, probably you're getting everything today. You're getting blockchain, you're getting algorithms, you're getting artificial intelligence. But anyway, I've been very interested in this because these are self-executing programs that are called smart contracts that are in the blockchain. So in theory, some of these contracts cannot be changed. And when they're executing, if there is a mistake in the code, that mistake is going to be forever. So it's going to be embedded like legislation inside the blockchain because it's immutable. Now, a very interesting case happened in November 2017. It's called the Parity Wallet. This is a contract that was designed specifically for multi-signatures. And there was a bug in the security execution of the contract that meant that you could not access the wallets. At some point, there is a calculation. At the time this happened, about 500 million US dollars, between 300 and 500 million, depending on the price that changes quite a lot, of money was locked and is still locked. And this is just the computer says no. The computer, this is a contract that is completely autonomous and is actually refusing to hand out the money and in the wallet. Now, this is probably going to happen more and more in smart contracts, and this is, again, one of the things that interests me the most, because these are the implementations of artificial intelligence that we're going to see every day. Also, examples of data mining for music, things like machine learning. This interests me a little bit more because this is actually what prompted a lot of my research on copyright. We are talking about machine learning algorithms that are going to go out and try to learn from large numbers of data. I could give you several examples, but there is one called Bot Dylan, for example, that has looked at 23,000, approximately 23,000 Irish folk songs, and it is now producing music on its own. Now, the interest for a copyright lawyer like me is whether or not any of the composers of those 23,000 songs could actually come back and sue the makers of the program because they're infringing copyright. If you are training your artificial intelligence, your machine learning, with any type of a large corpus of data, let's say text or music or poetry or movies or pictures or whatever, are you infringing copyright? And this is slightly tricky. So there is another one. I love talking about this. This was this case was presented at Republica, I think, in 2015. This is in 2014 a Swiss art group called Medium Group Bitnik. I'm probably mispronouncing that horribly. They created a shopping bot called the Darknet Web Shopper that went to the darknet and purchased things using Bitcoin. And it was just completely random. Whatever fit the price at the time that was allocated, it would buy it. And it purchased 10 yellow ecstasy pills that are pictured here. The the bot was taken into custody. Then later released because obviously there is no mens rea. It was considered to be an art project, etc., etc. But it's interesting that this is the other thing that is going to increasingly happen. I think not only with smart contracts, but also a lot of smart bots and smart contracts that are going to go out and do actions for you is increasingly possible with artificial intelligence. So what is the legal discussion here? Generally, the response whenever something, a new technology arises, is going to be as follows. You either ban the technology, which is quite common in certain types of technology, particularly in biotechnology. You can try to regulate it. You can try to self-regulate. So whoever is involved in the technology, the companies that are going to be involved in the technology are going to self-regulate. Or do nothing, and sometimes both are one and the same. You probably get a strong feeling of what I think about self-regulation. You can do something that my colleague Chris Marsden, also at the University of Sussex, and Ian Brown from Oxford, called co-regulation, which is actually almost like a regulation between the public and the private parties that are going to be to work symbiotically to try to reach good results. You could try applying existing law, because changing the law can be difficult. And obviously, you could draft new legislation to meet the technological challenges. And this is usually the solutions that are offered in most new technologies. Now, with all sorts of... again, I'm going to talk specifically about artificial intelligence in the sense limited, but also not from the regulation itself, but from the legal response and responsibility on something bad happens. So let's go back to the example of the self-driving car. What happens if a self-driving car kills a person, or crashes, or runs into a wall and kills the person that is driving it? What happens in those circumstances? I'm probably unique, or not unique completely, but I'm one of the few people who actually think this is not a big deal. And I'll explain why. Generally, when we're talking about liability, we're talking about three types of liability when it comes to a product like this. We have the product itself, the car. So the person who could be liable if there is something wrong could be the manufacturer of the car itself. Then we have the service, the provider of the service, the software manufacturer, the developer that maintains the software, the ISP if there is some form of internet connection, if they're liable for the crash. And the user, it could be possible that at some circumstance, the user could be neglectful, they forgot to patch something, they didn't maintain the car properly, the software is completely outdated and it thinks that there is a road when there is no road and things like that, or vice versa. So that actually could also tell us that there is liability there, and possibly the liability therefore is going to be very dependent on the facts. Is the manufacturer at fault? Is the software provider at fault? Or is the user at fault? Or it could be neither of those as well. There is a very strong indication in the case of the Uber crash. The police said, even if you had a person driving that car, fully awake and fully really good reflexes, probably they would still this person would have died because it was just too fast even for the computer to operate. Now, that could be another possibility. When it comes to smart contracts, it is a very similar analysis. You know, the product, service, and user, but we have an added level of complexity because a lot of the times these smart contracts are going to be completely distributed. So if there is a fault, sometimes you don't have anyone to sue, or someone is copying and pasting code. This happens a lot in smart contracts. People are lazy and they are just copying the code from someone else. And it's may be very difficult to identify someone to sue. Who caused the bug? Can they be identified? Is there a recourse? Can you actually get your money back in the case, for example, of this Parity wallet? And the answer to that is we don't know yet. This is probably an area that is ripe for regulation. In the example of data mining that I was telling you about, we have a very different type of liability. We have liability that is going to be copyright, and in copyright liability arises when someone has copied or done one of the acts that is exclusive to copyright owners. For example, use a substantial part of the work without permission, but there has to be a causal connection between the work that is the original that is being copied and the copy itself. And sometimes I think that with some artificial intelligence, particularly with data mining, I don't think that is going to happen. In few systems like the United States, most derivative works are going to be considered fair use and is going to be fine. So it's going to be considered a transformative use, and the resulting song is going to be transformed so much that it's going to be fine. But in some instances, particularly in some jurisdictions like Europe in general and the UK specifically, remember Brexit, that may be a different answer. Do we need a new system? And this is probably one of the biggest questions that we have right now. I tend to say, and I'll be happy if people disagree, this is at the very early stages of research, that existing negligence laws particularly are fit for purpose. I would say tort in common law systems, delict, extra contractual liability. I'm sure in Germany you have very similar systems. In tort law, I live in the UK now, so for example, we have a concept on the tort of negligence called proximate cause, where an event that is sufficiently related to an injury that the courts deem the event to be caused by that injury. So if there is enough connection, enough causal connection that you can say, yes, that event was caused by the negligence in this circumstance, that is going to be potentially liability under the tort of negligence. Criminal liability in cases where there's potentially criminal liability is very difficult to allocate any liability because obviously in case your Roomba kills you, there is no mens rea. Chances are there is very difficult. The Roomba wasn't intending to kill you, for example. So it's very difficult to prove criminal liability. The negligence has to be criminal level, and that's usually very high. We may need to overhaul contract law to accommodate things like smart contracts. And maybe this is something that sometimes it was actually floated as an idea ages and ages ago when we started first seeing autonomous agents in e-commerce. A couple of researchers have proposed that we should revisit maybe the Roman law of slavery. Servus non habet personam, the slaves do not have a personality, and there is an enormous corpus of Roman law that is designed to deal with people who have no personality but actually have autonomous actions. Concluding, there are things that we know, we don't know. There are things that we don't know that we don't know. That is generally one of my guiding principles in life. I don't think that we know enough about some of the challenges posed by artificial intelligence. These agents are already out there. That's one of the reasons why I prefer the term autonomous agent in many ways. The agents are already among us, and we can already see some of the potential liabilities that are going to arise from this, but maybe there are new challenges that we haven't thought of. So that's why I would ask you to sort of just keep your mind, and your eyes open to new challenges. And thank you very much. Should we just call it? I did fine, yeah?
We have 5 minutes left for questions. I'm not seeing any.
Oh,
there, yeah, on the right side.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
So your work seems to be built mainly on the UK law, if I'm getting that right.
Yeah.
But don't smart contracts, for example, like call for an international law because it can't be answered by a UK law only?
Yeah. I think smart contracts themselves are very, very interesting. They're deployed already. You can find them everywhere on the blockchain. Particularly, the Ethereum blockchain is now have thousands and thousands of these contracts. Yeah, we may need a new legislation. I think that even looking at this from the UK law perspective, I think that they pose a few problems that we haven't answered in legislation. So specifically smart contracts, I think we may need to revisit international law. We don't have an international law of contract as such. There are principles out there. We have an e-commerce directive that actually allows the existence of these contracts because it allows for the formalities to be conducted electronically. But yeah, there are aspects here. The fact that a lot of the decisions at the execution of the contract may not reflect the will of the parties, but it's something that you cannot actually action in a court of law, probably, yeah, it's going to necessitate a revisiting of what we understand. That is the one area that I would say probably our laws need revisiting. But yeah, I completely agree. Even I'm originally from a civil law jurisdiction, and even going back to my good old civil code in Costa Rica, which is, I think that it would be challenging for that, yeah. I hope that answers. Yeah, thanks.
One more question.
I've got another question. You mentioned that a lot of problems can be covered by current legislation or are already covered. But isn't there a tendency that there will be a different balance between legal problems and topics? I'll give you an example. Sorry for self-driving cars, but that's it will probably apply to other areas as well. Right now, if you've got a crash between two cars or a car and a pedestrian, you typically have a situation where you have two individuals who have a conflict, and then you have laws applied to that. But if you cover that through, say, a self-driving car, then you have a manufacturer there, and you have a product liability case, and you have a kind of imbalance of power because the manufacturer will prove that in a standard case the system behaves properly, so we assume that the system did something right, so maybe the pedestrian did something wrong, and a lot of cases are less related to solving the theoretical legal problem, but more like who can prove that the claim is correct or who's right, and things like that.
I absolutely agree, and I completely take your point that there may be a big imbalance between the parties, particularly the large manufacturer and the small pedestrian. I don't know, there is even a Black Mirror episode on that. The self-driving pizza car runs over a guy in this city, and et cetera, et cetera. I think that while I tend to agree with that, most cases I think are going to be solved by insurers. So you take your insurance as a driver, you take your insurance, the company has its insurance, and it's going to be a battle of insurers like most crashes nowadays. Now, yeah. Sorry? Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. So in cases of a pedestrian, it's the same situation right now. You're a pedestrian that is uninsured, and you're fighting against the insurance company of the car driver. So it's already that imbalance is there. I think that is not so much an aspect of changing the law, but more of things like access to justice, very basic elements, having clinics for people that do not have enough funds to have access to the legal to the legal system. It's already a problem, but I don't think it's a problem of changing the law, but actually allocating proper resources to where they should go to protect individuals, for example. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Andres, for your thoughts and your input. And I'm sure that you have a little more time to continue talking afterwards. Yeah. And we will just take some minutes to change the stage, and then we will continue talking about robots. See you in a minute. Thank you.